Keats Nightingale. In 2013, I was lucky enough to watch a nightingale singing for 3 or 4 minutes only a few yards from me. As my friend and I listened to its incomparable song, all sense of self fell away. For a minute or two, all that existed was the song and the intense hearing of the song. I described it to others afterwards as a spiritual experience, and it was. This year in France, to my delight and surprise, nightingales were singing outside my friend's garden. On returning home, I reread Keats' Ode to a Nightingale, surely one of the greatest poems in the English language, it being much more than a poem about nightingales. The contrast between the suffering of the world and the beauty of the song, and how to reconcile the two, seems to be one of his themes. Keats is aware in the poem of the small self and the selfless self, particularly in the last stanza where he says, "Forlorn, the very word is like a bell to toll me back from thee to my sole self." Keats said about poetry that if it come not naturally as the leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all. John Middleton Murray comments, "In some strange and simple mode of tree experience, forever beyond our knowledge, comes the heave and upsurge in the tree every spring, with all the pangs of tree birth." During a very stressful time, after he'd sat with his dying brother, and he himself started to suffer from tuberculosis, Keats cries out almost Christ-like, "May there be some power in John Keats that can watch his suffering, lucid and unperturbed." The ability to be present to our own suffering rather than be overwhelmed by it is at the center of mindfulness and all other genuine spiritual practices. It is, of course, easier said than done, and Keats didn't have the benefit of access to comparative practices that we all have. I sense, though, that his negative capability was a way of him witnessing to his varying feelings and experience. Perhaps he meditated without labeling it as such. In any case, after his crisis, he sees himself and humankind as part of nature. "I go among the fields," he wrote in a letter, "and catch a glimpse of a stoat or a field mouse peeping out of the grass. The creature hath a purpose, and its eyes are bright with it. I go amongst the buildings of a city, and I see a man hurrying along. To what? The creature has a purpose, and his eyes are bright with it." This is not the anthropomorphic sentimentality of a Beatrice Potter. He is simply seeing that we are fundamentally a part of nature, physically and spiritually. No separation. Just as I experienced listening to the nightingale. He's seeing himself as part of the larger picture, and he wrote his poetry in this state of non-self. I would suggest that his poetry could be seen as a spiritual practice. He was certainly able to integrate his experience of pain and pleasure Perhaps his training as a surgeon enabled him to accept the strains and stresses of being human in a more realistic way than some of the other romantic poets. Well, I started with the Nightingale, so I'll read the first and third stanzas of Ode to a Nightingale. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drains 1 minute past, and Lethywards had sunk. 'Tis not through envy of thy happy lot, but being too happy in thine happiness, that thou, light-winged dryad of the trees, in some melodious plot of beechen green and shadows numberless, singest of summer in full-throated ease. Fade far away, dissolve, and quite forget what thou among the leaves hast never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret, here, where men sit and hear each other groan, where palsy shakes a few sad last grey hairs, where youth grows pale and spectre thin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow, and leaden eye despairs, where beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow.